All right, chapter 1.4 is on solving quadratic equations. A or an quadratic equation is when x is an equation that can be written in general form as ax squared plus bx plus c. This is your standard form, right? There are 4 different ways that you can solve a quadratic equation. In this video, we're only going to do 2 of those ways. First way is solving by factoring. So let's say we have 6x squared plus 3x equals to 0. The best way to factor this is first we can identify that we have a greatest common factor. So between 6x squared and 3x, our greatest common factor would be actually 3x. So once we factor out the 3x, we are left with 2x plus 1 equals to 0. Now, when you're solving by factoring, once you have factored out your terms or factored into 2 binomials or whatever the case may be, then you set both of those factors or all factors to 0 and solve for each individual variable. So in this case, I would set 3x equal to 0 and I would set 2x plus 1 equal to 0. Now I need to solve for the 2 equations. So for the first one, I would divide by 3 on both sides, and so x would equal to 0. The next one I do subtract the 1 from both sides, and 2x equals to negative 1. Divide by a 2, and then x equals to negative 1/2. So for this problem, I have 2 solutions. X is equal to 0 and negative 1/2. Next one. I have x squared plus 4x equals to 12. Well, I noticed that my 12 is on the other side of the equal sign, so that means that I would need to combine all my terms on one side first. So I would actually subtract the 12 from both sides, and since there are no other like terms, I would do x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals to 0. Now, with this being said, I can easily factor, and factor meaning what multiplies to be negative 12 and adds up to be a positive 4. Well, my factors of negative 12 can be what? Negative 6 and 2, or negative 2 and 6, or I could do a negative 3 and 4, or a negative 4 and 3. So out of all of these, the only one that would add up to be a positive 4 is x minus 2 and x plus 6. So x minus 2 and x plus 6 equals to 0. Now I set these 2 binomials equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals to 0 and x plus 6 equals to 0. Now I solve for each individual x. So I add 2 to both sides. And so x would equal to 2 on this one, and then I would subtract the 6 from both sides. And x would equal to negative 6 on that one. And again, I have 2 solutions. It's okay, sometimes you can have 1 solution or a repeating solution, or 2 or 3 or 4, just depending on what you ended up factoring. All right, let's move along. The second way that we solve for equations is extracting roots, or I like to call it the square root property. So when you have a squared variable in an equation, right, where d has to be greater than 0, it has exactly 2 solutions. It's the positive square root of that number and the negative square root of that number. So let's take, for instance, I have x squared equals to 16. Well, I want to extract the root, or I say use the square root property and take the square root of both sides. So x equals to the plus and minus, 4. Because when you take the square root of 16, it equals to 4. So again, that'll be the plus and minus of 4. There are 2 solutions. That's the reason why we have a plus and a minus. Now, the next one, we have something a little different. We have 4x squared equals to 12. Well, is the x squared by itself? No. So when you're extracting these roots, the x squared or the squared has to be by itself. So this time I would divide a 4 by both sides, and then that would give me x squared equals to 3. Now that my x squared is by itself, I take the square root property of both sides, and x equals to the plus or minus. Well, since we can't take the square root of 3, that would be just the square root of 3. And then that would be my solution. Another level up of solving for extracting roots is, let's say we have a whole binomial enclosed with a squared. You use the same square root property. You just must have to get the binomial by itself. So we divide 2 by both sides, and then I have x minus 3 squared equals to 4. Well, this side is by itself squared, so I take the square root property of both sides, and now I have 2 separate solutions. I have x minus 3 equals to, well, what's the square root of 4? Positive 2. But since I'm doing the square root property, I also have a x minus 3 equals to the negative 2. Now, solve for each individual one, add a 3 to both sides, and x equals to positive 5. Add a 3 to both sides, and this side is x equals to positive 1. So again, you have 2 different solutions as well here, okay? All right, so we will get back to solving more quadratic equations on our next video. Thank you.